Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Two Wise Guys. We're recording live on Saturday, June 10th, 2017. I'm your host, Christopher, broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. I'm joined today, as always, by my eternally bearded co-host, Dan, who is broadcasting from Columbia, South Carolina. Say hello, Dan.
Hello, everyone. Shorter beard today.
Yeah, you did trim it. It looks nice. It looks like you shaved your head a little bit too, right?
Yeah, it's getting a little hot out here. We're up in the 90s now, and in the next few weeks, it's probably supposed to be getting up into the hundreds. So it was time to cut the hair off.
Yeah, that's about the time to do that, huh? I did the same thing. It's been getting a little more toasty out here as well. But anyways, we want to welcome you to the show, and thanks for tuning in tonight. We have a jam-packed lineup. For those of you who are watching for the very first time, this is a show centered around thoughtful discussion. We tackle subjects ranging from science, technology, and popular culture to news and conspiracy theories, basically everything but the kitchen sink. If you want to join the conversation, feel free to jump into the live chat, which is located to the right of the video frame. Dan and I will make every effort to answer your questions as they relate to the podcast. If you're enjoying our channel, we want to encourage you to click the subscribe button, which is just below the video title. And don't forget to also click the little bell icon that appears next to it so you can be notified of upcoming shows and other video content that we post. We have two main ways to contact us via email. Visit our brand new website, twowiseguys.org. Click on the contact tab at the top of the page and fill out the form with your name, email, and a comment. Or just email us at twowiseguysorg@gmail.com. For those of you who don't want to sit down and watch the live stream, and we want to let you know that we've launched the Two Wise Guys podcast on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. The links are going to be in the show notes, so please just give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and give us a good review to help us move up in the listings on those platforms. We're also going to be on iTunes in the coming weeks. We're just taking care of a technical problem and waiting for Apple to review the podcast, but I'll be sure to let you know when we're up and running on iTunes. As mentioned before, our new website is now live. It's pretty simple at this point. However, you can view all our latest posts and video content there. Now, with our updates out of the way, let's get into our first segment, The Good, the Bad, and the Strange. Dan is going to be sharing some interesting articles today, including one about NASA. Dan?
All right, everybody. And again, welcome to the show. We thank you for tuning in today. And if you haven't already, please make sure you share it as well. Put it on Facebook, Twitter, whatever social media you're on. Kind of help spread the word. That'd be awesome. And we're going to get into the good, bad, and the strange for this week. And most of you know by now that I'm a pretty big fan of space and space travel and space exploration, and generally sci-fi kind of stuff. And I saw this headline on Ars Technica this week, and I got pretty excited. NASA has a spiffy new class of astronauts, but where will they go? So this is the first class of astronauts that have been actually trained at NASA in quite a while. As most of you know by now, the space shuttle program has ended, and so now most of the launches that are going up are actually private flights that are being operated by companies like SpaceX, and those are just taking up they're taking up resources and things like that to the space station. Most of the astronauts that do go up are going up with the Russians right now, so this is pretty exciting. Some pretty exciting news to see that we've got a new batch of astronauts, and they're looking forward to possibly what might be ahead. And they don't really have a full plan yet, but there's talk in this article about possibly having them go back to the moon or even Mars. So I think it's pretty exciting. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I do think that's exciting. I was always in favor of the space program and exploration and such. I think it just sort of ties in with some of our what's just sort of naturally part of the human spirit, which is to explore the unexplored, to go to new places without sounding too much like Star Trek, The Next Generation. But I think it's a really great thing. I actually was really disappointed when I found out that the space shuttle program was ending. So it's good to see that there's more on the horizon, with Mars and possibly the moon. I believe Trump even mentioned that he would like for us to be able to return to the moon as well, which would, I don't know if that would entail landing people on the moon or if it would just be sending more probes or what, but that would be really great.
It's a space station, Chris. For
Sorry.
anyone who got the reference, that was you're awesome. I said it's not a moon; it's a space station.
That went right over my head. I should have got that.
It's all right. It's all right. Moving on to the bad, and this one kind of goes along with a lot of the tech news that's been going on in the last couple of weeks with the Wannacry worm. A task force tells Congress health IT health IT security is in critical condition. And this is an article that kind of a research group went through and put together a report about the health and security of the health industry in this country. So for those of you who are not aware, a few weeks back, this big worm came out called Wannacry, and it affected, I think it was something like 300,000 machines worldwide. It took down over half of the British Health Service, so it was a really big deal, really bad thing that came out. Mostly it affected old systems like Windows XP, but it also affected some newer ones like Windows 7. But a lot of these healthcare systems, because it costs so much to upgrade the system, and they're just used to using that same old hardware and that same old equipment, they don't upgrade their systems. And so what this thing would do is it got into the system and it would infect one particular workstation or server, and then it would do a scan to see what else was available, and it would spread its way through there, like that. And so they did a study in the U.S. to see what they had to say about it here, and it talks about it being exceedingly failing at almost every single test. And because it's using old hardware, what we call legacy hardware, it's running old operating systems like Windows XP, pictured here. And really, they were saying it's in critical condition, needs to be upgraded immediately, which is, again, part of the reason that the hospitals in particular don't do this, is because every time they change their systems, they have to be re-audited for their certifications and everything. So I think this is a big deal. It's something that we really need to be aware of, and it's something that I'd be willing to talk about more. But again, I try to limit how much technical stuff I talk about on this program. Chris, do you have anything you want to add on this?
Yeah, I think it'd be really great to upgrade the software, hardware, et cetera, for the health industry. Not too sure how the financial aspects of that all work out, especially when you get into like individual doctors' offices. I'm assuming that each doctor's office would be responsible for upgrading their own technology. So it's like sort of almost like a catch-22, because I feel like a lot of them would try to save money because they feel like it'd be better spent elsewhere. If the computer hardware is functioning well enough, it's like, if it isn't broken, why fix it? But I think that'd be a good thing. I think with whenever we're dealing with technology, inevitably there's ways to circumvent and to hack things and to cause problems. So even if there were to be upgrades, I feel that there would be, they just present new opportunities for new types of hacks as well. So it's never foolproof, but yeah, I definitely support something like that to sort of reform that.
Yeah, and you touched on the main thing there, which is the money. The hardware itself would not be that expensive. I mean, you could even use the same hardware that you already have and repurpose it with something like Linux, which is a free operating system to use, and it would work just fine. So a lot of it is that these different industries use particular software programs that they've used for years that maybe they're not supported on Windows 10 or on a Mac or on a newer Linux version. And so they have to run something like Windows XP to make their software work. So that would involve buying new software. But really the big thing is their government regulation behind it, is that every time that we change and upgrade a system to a new piece of hardware or to a new server, or I shouldn't say I don't work in this industry, or that they would, upgrade their software, upgrade their hardware, they automatically have to get re-registered and recertified with the state, which costs a ton of money. And so I think that's really the big thing that's involved there is, they don't want to have to spend the money on upgrading this stuff and getting recertified. But that's a good point about needing to get all that stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, all the bureaucratic red tape that has to be cleared up, that's really unfortunate, that things get bogged down and weighed down like that. True progress gets weighed down because of things like that. But seriously, though, whose desk is that? I'm looking at that desk that's on that graphic, and there's like all these yogurts and snacks all over it.
I think it's even like one of those bowls that like you put like Asian to-go food in or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? They have the lid that comes off.
Yeah. It's just interesting that that's like the headline image for the article, and it's like got all these snacks all over it. They couldn't. It's like they couldn't find like a clean hospital computer desk to shoot. Just funny to me.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if maybe they went in and just took a picture of somebody's desk randomly.
Yeah, I'm assuming.
All right, moving on to the strange. It's another R's. I spent a lot of time on R's this week. I enjoyed their site. They have a lot of good stuff on there. Journal tries crowdsourcing peer reviews and sees excellent results. So I thought this was interesting, and because I thought this kind of touched on your segment you did on the reproducibility crisis a few weeks back. And so the gist of this article is that there is a peer-reviewed journal. I can't remember which one it said it wasn't here. I kind of just skimmed this briefly. I didn't read the entire thing. And basically what they're doing is rather than going through the panel process like you normally would with a journal article to get it published in an academic journal, this particular journal is accepting pieces of research and studies that have been crowdsourced. So they go through and they say, is there support for this research to be conducted? If so, then we'll include it in our journal. And so I think it's kind of an interesting take on it. So it's not going through the academic gatekeepers that are normally in place at a place like a university or at like an academic. What's the word I'm looking for? It's like an academic society. Chris, did you have a chance to look over this one at all?
I did not. I was hoping to, but I do have an opinion on that. And just to let our viewers know that the reproducibility crisis, just to briefly define that, refers to when there's a study done on a particular subject. I don't know, for example, like Arctic penguins migrating patterns or something like that. The being able to reproduce or see the same results by taking the same steps that the scientists from the original experiment performed, basically. That's a really bad way of explaining it. But basically, to get the same results of a study performed by the original person who did the study, that would be the ability to reproduce results. And the reproducibility crisis states that a lot of studies that are conducted now are not conducted in the best form of science. In other words, and it's causing a lot of these studies to not be able to be reproduced because they're not conducted properly, or there's just not the best work done or documentation done, that sort of thing. But as far as like the crowdsourcing and getting into a peer-reviewed journal, I think that's great for people who are more on the fringe, sort of doing research in areas that are not necessarily widely accepted in the scientific community. Basically, anyone that doesn't agree with the status quo of what the general science community believes on any particular topic would be able to be financed if there's enough people that want to see that research done, which I think is really great. On the flip side of that, though, it makes me wonder if they would still be able to be peer reviewed, given the fact that many of these journals are very selective about the content that they choose to include. If that content doesn't necessarily follow their belief system or scientific belief, then I feel like they would still these peer reviewed, it would be still difficult for people to get peer reviewed, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing too, is that, and something that came to mind as you were talking, is that this isn't necessarily even specifically a scientific journal. I think this particular one is, but if this is a successful venture and it becomes more accepted and acclaimed, it could open up the doorway to other disciplines as well. Like, for instance, I think I mentioned before that I'm a political science and religious studies major, and the process of getting peer-reviewed articles published is pretty much the same across the board as far as I understand it. But like within political science, for instance, it's it's hard to find publications that have been put out there that have published articles that don't fall in line with their political ideology or the narrative that that particular journal or that particular school is pushing for. And so I think that this could be either really good or really bad. I'm not really sure which yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really great for the little guy or the person who has the potential to research something or ideas to research something. It really does help in that area. So I think it's a really great thing. It may not break down all of the barriers, but it still does help for one of the big barriers, which can be finances. It can always be difficult to find someone to finance your projects if it doesn't really fit into the. I mean, it's difficult enough to get projects financed, even with standard practices. But if you're not really believing, or if you don't really follow the current state of science or political science, and you're trying to break new ground, it's always more challenging, I think. But this is definitely seems like a desire to step in the right direction from some people, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. But that's all I've got for the good, the bad, and the strange this week. So Chris, if you want to go and take it away, let's get into the fact or fiction.
Yep, time for fact or fiction. For those of you who've seen this before, we basically, Dan and I alternate weeks, we alternate shows, and today is my turn to present the headlines to Dan for him to determine if it's true, a fact headline, or a fictitious headline. So with that, we're going to get right into it. And let me get the screen share on here. Here we go. First headline: selfie taking trout fisherman slapped in the face by beaver.
Dude, I hope that this was true, because I don't know where you make this stuff up from.
So you're saying it's true?
I'm saying fact.
It's fiction.
Oh, I should have known. Very good, sir.
Thank you. Usually, well, I don't want to give away my secrets, because then you'll take my ideas. Anyway, mayor's son who ate cat vomit believed it to be oatmeal.
That one I could see. I could see kids doing that. I'll say fact.
That is also fiction.
Oh, all right. It's gonna be a dramatic comeback. Let's do this.
Have to do one like the Cavaliers, man. Yeah, I pull a LeBron James here. All right, number 3. Weight Watchers demonstrator shoplifts cupcakes. A little ironic.
These are hard, man. These are really hard. I'm going to go with fact, since the last two have been fiction.
Good call, sir. It is fact.
There we go.
Stoned wallabies make crop circles.
I hope this is true. I'm going to say fact.
Also fact.
Yes. All right, we're tied up 2-2.
Excessive dung beetle population causing local residents to wear surgical masks.
I'm going to say fiction on that one.
That is fiction. Good call.
Yes.
Ah, man, maybe I made that one too wordy. What gave that away? Anyway, pink-clad pooch stolen from gay bar by man with Britney tattoo.
Wow, that's a headline right there. I'm gonna go with fiction on that one.
That is a fact, sir.
Is it really?
Yeah, I actually pulled that from the Sun.
I'm not surprised. You need to find that, and you need to put that link in the show notes.
Okay, well, I'll make a note of that. So what is it, 3-3 right now?
3-3 right now.
All right. Strange crashing and rattling noises reported coming from the top secret airbase.
Oh. Well, how will we know it was a top secret base? I'm going to say fiction.
Good one. I almost said just airbase or secret airbase, but anyway. Man dressed as penguin receives more votes than liberal Democrats.
Fact.
I just anyway, I thought it was going to be a good one, but I guess not. You're too smart for me, man. So what is it, 5-3?
Yes, 5-3.
Flava Flav suing nightclub after oblivious bouncer ejected him, saying, "We don't got no room."
Oh, man, that's tough. I'm gonna say fiction.
That is fiction. Oh, you're on a
Yes.
roll, dude.
Dan clenches the win already, but let's finish it.
Yeah. Dead woman told to mow her lawn.
Wow. Let's say fiction.
That is fact. But you did pull out the win, sir. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir.
Harbinger of things to come, then maybe LeBron and the Cavs will actually win the series, but I doubt it.
Oh boy. Oh boy. The guy I work with at night, he is always listening to sports radio. So the only reason I actually understand anything you're talking about is because of him right now. So hats off to Mr. Russell. Cheers.
Hats
All
off
right,
to you, sir.
Hats off to you, sir. So
Okay,
that was
with that,
fun.
we're gonna end that segment and transition into our main segment. Dan, take us away.
All right. So this week, I had a hard time coming up with what to talk about because there was so much that happened over the last couple of weeks. But what I decided on actually came from the fact that I've spent most of the day today working on going through a school assignment right now. And so we're submitting research proposals to do a very short, brief research project because our class is only about 6 weeks long right now. So this particular class, we spent the last 4.5 weeks going through different different things that we're supposed to be learning about doing scholarly research and things like that. These are capstone classes, so it's at the end of your your college time. It's like 2 classes before your final one, and it's supposed to be teaching you this is exactly step by step how you go through doing research. And the thing that I'm amazed about is that in this assignment, we're supposed to be going through people's research proposals and taking a look at how they, how they are doing their research, how they're planning on doing their research before they actually go out and do it. And so we're taking a time and we're reviewing each other's stuff as if it were a peer-reviewed panel. And there's quite a few that I've noticed so far where they're not actually doing that. Like their entire research project and their entire methodology is built upon finding evidence to support their own personal agenda. And this is not the first time I've seen it. This is not the first document I've seen it. This isn't even, I've seen it in journals themselves where I've gone and I've done database searches through the university's website and the library website to find, scholarly peer-reviewed journals that speak on a particular topic or subject. And there's quite a few out there that do this exact same thing. They start with an agenda and with a narrative that the researcher is pushing, and they're cherry picking data throughout different sources in order to support their claim. And I really feel like this is a common thing that's been happening more and more, especially recently. And I think today was just the catalyst that, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it really, it's really been bothering me today. So I was like, let's talk about it. It's a good show topic. So Chris, you and I have been talking over the last few weeks about, the last few days about, the scientific method and the way people do research, and claims about evolution versus creation, or whatever the other subjects might be. And so I just think it's an interesting, or maybe I should say it's ironic that the very next day after talking about that particular subject, and about quantum physics and stuff like that, that I come into a situation where I'm encountered with that same sort of researcher bias. So I don't really have a set path of where I want to go with the discussion. So I don't know if you have anything that pops out to you, any ideas based on your experience with it, or what you've been seeing as you've been pursuing your Mr. E project on your own.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Mr. E is right now a blog that I just started in the last few weeks, and it's also gonna have a YouTube channel that's gonna be tied into it, where I'm gonna do videos talking about sort of like fringe topics, I guess you could say. That's my like soft way of describing it, but it's more about topics that are not necessarily mainstream as far as, and it's more specifically geared towards science and religion. So they definitely will be controversial topics for some, and actually probably for a lot of people. And it's more about exploring what we know, what we don't know, and what we could know about different subjects. So there's just a little plug for what I'm doing as it relates to what we're talking about now. But to your point, Dan, it is really interesting. I think it's part of sort of human nature to want to. I mean, I feel like our personalities and who we are is sort of we're going to gravitate towards certain types of people, certain genres. Some people gravitate towards sports. Some people gravitate towards fashion or politics or or computers, any number of things, because in all honesty, God created us all differently. So we all bring our very unique and interesting perspectives and are different based on our life experiences. Where again, everyone has sort of a different life experience. Not everyone grew up in the same household with the same parents. So that's basically, a recipe for everyone having slightly different perspectives. So that's understandable. And I think that's an important thing. We should all culture and nurture our own individual perspectives. But when it comes to what I believe you're saying, Dan, which is trying to prove our perspective in the sense of making all of the data, sharing basically all of the data that supports our theory and none of the data that doesn't support our theory or idea or belief, then I think there's a problem, because then we're not really being honest with ourselves in our own research. And I think one of the important things to developing belief systems and ideological systems is to honestly take a step back and look at the big picture and see how everything sort of interacts and works together for any particular subject. Not to try to prove, yes, my idea is right, and here's all the facts, and let's just push away all of the information that doesn't agree with what I believe. So I don't know if that's sort of in the direction of what you're thinking, but it's definitely one area that is something that I'm working on personally for my own research. So I don't want to just necessarily prove my own ideas to be right, but I want to research the subjects that I'm researching and find the truest or the most recent information, and put everything together and sort of get a clear picture, and form my opinions based off of that, not necessarily off of my preconceived notions.
Well, that's the whole point of doing research. It's not that you're supposed to go into it saying, I believe that, like, for instance, I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but there's one student who is doing a project on undocumented immigrants, is the politically correct term to use there, and he's in favor of an easier path to citizenship, or at least legal status for non-legal immigrants. And so his entire system is built upon finding research that agrees with, essentially and it's really weird. I don't even know how he's going to find this research, but it's the idea that you're going to get, journal articles that agree with that. The survey model that he's going to use is only a handful of questions to a handful of people who are in the same community that he's in, who have the same beliefs that he has. And so you're going to have a totally skewed, one-sided view of things. And I feel like it's just a continuation of social media at this point. That makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And that I feel like we've almost been trained to do that going to school. I don't feel like when you go to school, you're shown a certain perspective. With impunity, we're shown one version of the Earth's history, for example. So we're told in school that evolution is it. And we ignore any other facts that speak to the contrary of that. And that's just one particular example I'm using. I'm not speaking to that right now, but all I'm saying is that in our systems of learning, of education, it tends to be very biased towards one particular way of doing things. And even in regard to students' personalities, what I spoke to earlier, we all have different personalities and interests and upbringings. So and just in the same way, we all have a different way of learning. So some people learn in different ways. Some people are more visual learners. Some people are more auditory learners. Some people have to learn much more easily by doing things. We're all just very different. And I feel like our education system is trying to do better with that, which is a really great thing, but there's also flaws in it. And I think that the education system has to shoulder some of the blame for people bringing that approach to their research, I guess. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like there could be I'm sure there are classes on how to do research, but not maybe not everybody's taken those classes. I don't know if those are required when you're doing a certain discipline, such as yours.
Yeah, the discipline that I'm in, I'd say I'm a political science and religious studies major. Those are my concentrations. I'm an interdisciplinary studies major. It's just easier to say the other two because most people don't really understand. At least most people I've talked to don't really fully understand what interdisciplinary studies is. It's basically the idea that you'll take research data from different disciplines and apply it to a particular problem that you want to handle, and then you handle it through a variety of different means and ways to do it. So, for instance, for my research project, I'm working on I'm taking the data from research that's already been done about people's views on energy independence and alternative energies and stuff like that, and how and a lot of the research has already been done about, how do conservatives look at it? How do liberals look at it? How do, Republicans or Democrats or independents look at it? There's a lot of research on that, but there's not really a lot of what we call qualitative research on, what are people's real views on it? Not necessarily like, what are you going to answer on a survey of a yes or no question? It's going to be okay, you say that you're a Republican and you say that you support, drilling for oil or fracking or something like that in this country. Is there something more to it than that? Because a lot of them will actually say, no, yeah, I'm okay with solar and stuff like that too. It's more of, let's look at the big picture kind of thing, and that's what this class is all about. It's not necessarily the looking at the other means of researching it. It's looking at what is the method, like what is the layout of doing academic research, and what is you're supposed to do it in a scientific way, and the idea of, and when I say scientific way, I mean you form a theory or a hypothesis, and you proceed to do your research, and you find specific data from different research that's already been done. You take your theory and then you apply it in your research, and then you find it, but you don't come into it with an agenda. You come into it with the genuine curiosity of what is the data going to show me in the end, and then you make your assumptions, or or not your assumption, the implications from the data that you get. And so I don't know if other disciplines don't use that model and they don't have those classes, but honestly, I feel like that's something that should be getting taught earlier than in your last couple semesters of college. That's really something that should be taught at a lower level. So, for instance, I've seen quite a few literature reviews that are really nothing more than a compilation of document reports, so like a book report basically, rather than saying going through and doing your evaluation of the data and then presenting it. It shows what the point of it really, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to be critical of all these other students, because I know that everyone's on their own journey and everyone learns differently. I think the big idea that I took away from this is why is it that we seem to be failing in terms of critical thinking and being able to better understand where we come from and what's, maybe not where we come from, but I don't know how to put it. Like why is it that we get to this point and still have such a hard time actually doing legitimate, good research? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I think that does really boil down to, most people don't really, they just, I think it boils down to this. This is why we do this show, is so that we can really, teach ourselves and hopefully our viewers to really be able to think independently and not necessarily just take every bit of information at face value. And I agree with you. I think a lot of research is at the student level is probably done more in like that book report sort of fashion where you're just gathering evidence. It's I've tried doing different things myself, and then with some of my research, and it's difficult when you don't have the time or the finances to be able to really carry out some true research. So, I mean, I can understand that aspect of it, but even then, I do feel like it's important that we as students and as we're going to school, that we're taught how to look at disparaging viewpoints. So, viewpoints that don't necessarily agree with our own, so that we can at least somewhat understand where people are coming from that believe those things or are buying into that. So, I mean, I think maybe to answer your question, I think it may come down to people becoming that they're a little afraid that their viewpoint or their ideology will break down under scrutiny. So if they look at something else or another viewpoint, that it might change their viewpoint or it might somehow disprove their viewpoint. And a lot of people are afraid of that. And it's something that, for me personally, that I grew up with. I grew up in a Christian household, and my parents were missionaries and my dad was a pastor. So I sort of always bought in and believed the Bible stories, and just automatically, because that's what I grew up with and that's what I knew. And I never really thought to, look into it or check, basically make it my own, I guess. So, and it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started doing that. And that's not to say that I don't believe what I believed before. In fact, my beliefs have gotten stronger as I've understood more accurately the differences between, a Christian ideology and a pagan ideology. I'll just call it that, for lack of a better term at this point. But so it's actually improved my viewpoint on that subject. But for example, I feel like people who don't do that research or make things their own, they're missing out on a lot of things, and sort of like a quality of life where they can be really self-assured and knowing that, and their convictions are solid according to them, or according to what they know. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, it makes sense. I don't know. I guess I wonder, because I don't know. I mean, as a kid, yeah, you grow up and you believe what your parents tell you, and I understand that. I guess to me, it begs the question of, if you don't question what you believe, then how do you hold on to that and, I don't know, and feel comfortable with what you believe? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with you. And actually, I was going to mention that because I know that you have always been more of like a person who questions things, and I always respect that, and I think that's a really great thing. It's something that I've really sought to improve, or sought to pursue in my own life, is to really question things more, so that I can make it my own, so that I can really truly understand why I believe what I believe. And if what I believe or had believed in the past is not necessarily accurate, then I want to be able to change that so that it more directly aligns with what my current understanding of the truth is, my current perspective. So, and I think to put this in, I don't want to like rail on Christians either, but I want to kind of bring maybe a little bit of religion into this, even though we're talking about science. But I think it can frequently happen with Christians where, you go to church on Sunday, and you're raised in a Christian household your whole life, and you have an experience that's similar to mine, where you just believe stuff because that's what you've been told, and it's good and that's right. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that per se, but you're never going to own those beliefs. In other words, you're never going to be able to speak to somebody else with conviction about why you believe in Jesus. Or why the Bible is true, and why and that Jesus died for our sins, basically. So I'm putting a little bit of a religious spin on this, but anyway, I would have never really been able to do that before having those convictions and sort of researching that stuff for myself. But I've done that in other fields as well more recently. So within science and political areas as well. And so I think it comes down to fear, though. I honestly do. I think it comes down to fear that your ideals are not going to hold up to scrutiny. Maybe.
Why do you think that fear exists?
That's a really great question, because I think it's probably an unfounded fear. In a certain way, I think because it challenges everything that you know. So again, back to that example of a child growing up in a Christian household. It's what you grew up with. It's what you're told is right. It basically, what if what I was believing was completely wrong? For example, if I grew up in a Hindu household, am I always going to stay Hindu because I just want to ignore the facts of everything else that's going along or going on? Or am I going to be more open-minded? And I would hope that I'd be open-minded, but I just don't know. It's so hard to say, because I feel like it's very subjective. It's based on your own perspective and your own experience. And as we were saying earlier in the show, everyone's personal experiences and upbringings are so diverse. It's just a really difficult thing to, it's very personal to some people. And maybe I'm one of those people where it's very tough to say that what I believed was wrong. I guess it's more of a challenge to say I was wrong in my beliefs than it is to actually find something that's better or could be more right than what I knew previously, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. And I don't know if you want to keep going down this trail or not, but just a thought that came to mind is, how much of that fear do you think comes from external factors, like what other people, what friends or what family might think?
Again, I think that's subjective, and it's different for every person. It maybe years ago it would have been more affected by family. So in my younger days, I would say like my preteens and early teens. But to be honest with you, by the time I was 15 or 16, I remember it was right around the time I was able to drive. I just decided I didn't want to go to church anymore. Again, I'm using this religious example, but it's my perspective, it's my experience, so that's what I have to relate to. So I sort of like pushed that stuff away because it wasn't making very much sense to me. It was beginning to not make very much sense to me. So I guess in a way, I was challenging those ideals without even really thinking about it. And eventually, of course, my journey led me back to the Lord later on. So yes, so the answer to your question, yes, it can be affected by peers or by family. And I think, again, earlier in life, yes. Now I would say I'm very little affected by my peers or my family. It's more about what I personally believe is right. So it's almost like a maturing process, I guess.
Yeah, it just means you're an old man now.
Yeah, growing up to be old.
That's right. That's interesting. And this is one of those things where I don't know. I'm sure that I know that I've experienced that in the past too, of being concerned about what other people think, but I don't know. It's just you and I have very different backgrounds, so it's interesting to hear from where you came from. For most of you don't know the relationship that Chris and I have. He's my brother-in-law. I happen to really like his sister a lot. That's why I married her. But we, Chris, like he said, he and his sister, they grew up, in a Christian home. Parents were missionaries, and the dad was a pastor, and I grew up not in church. My family, we knew the Bible stories. We would go to church occasionally. About half the family was Catholic, and so we would go to a mass occasionally for like a graduation or for a wedding or something like that. But growing up, we didn't really go to church until probably middle school. I think is when, or the end of middle school, the beginning of high school is when we started going after my little sister was born. And so I didn't really become a Christian until I was 18. So it's interesting to hear the differences in the story background there.
Yeah, even if I can just speak to that real quick, even with my own household with my sister, her personality is so different from mine as well. And, she had completely different reactions to similar, social situations. I mean, after all, we're growing up with the same set of parents. We had the same, we're together like 50% of our lives or more. And so, and she had I would say she was more like you, where she would be much more questioning of stuff. And, but I feel like at the same time, she went through phases. I went through phases of different things. We all go through phases. And that's one thing that I've sort of come to terms with is whenever you're dealing with other people and their beliefs and things, it can be touchy subjects, but it's always challenging to remember that people hold different beliefs because of their vastly different experiences throughout life. And I guess the closest thing I can relate that to right now is just being married and not being able to even understand sometimes why my wife does what she does. And like, gosh, I think that's just like certain situation. I'm just like, why would you do that? Why would you do it this way? Why wouldn't you do it this way? And that even is frustrating. So, and carry that over into more of like the public domain or the social domain where, you're going to work and you're going to school every day with people who have different perspectives and different approaches to the same thing. For example, in your case, it's a research project. Everyone brings their own perspective and experiences based on whatever is most prominently input into their life at that point in time. So, and yes, I think social media plays a big role in that. I think news media plays a big role in that. The internet, of course, in general, just plays a huge role in that, in shaping our ideals now. I mean, you and I grew up in our preteens without the internet, really. I mean, it's there, but you don't really have that same type of access, that ubiquitous access that we have now. I mean, I remember you had to, when I was a kid, you still had to use the 28K and 56K modem where you dial up, and you literally have to like forego your house phone for whatever period of time is.
Oh yes,
you're online, and then if somebody calls you, you try to pick up the phone, you get that annoying. So,
and then you're playing a game on the internet over a 56K modem. Someone picks up the phone, you get kicked off, and you lose.
Exactly. So, yeah, we come from a transitional period in that age, but it's so much more prevalent now with the internet being what it is, having access to it on so many different levels. Basically, every technological thing that's in our lives now is somehow connected or interconnected in that way. Internet of Things, that I think that really has changed the shaping of our culture. It's made people who would not have necessarily been aware of certain social and economical situations become much more aware of it. Things are becoming much less localized now. And I think you're seeing people sort of struggling with that or grappling with that understanding. For example, if you're from a certain part of the United States, for example, if I grew up on the East Coast, I would be completely unaware of any type of social events happening on the West Coast in California. For example, there's a high Hispanic population here, and there wasn't where I grew up. So there's different social issues here with immigration, and people are much more sensitive about that subject than they would be in certain other areas of the country, and it's understandably so. But now even a person living in New York or I don't know, Indiana is going to be just about as aware of those situations as anybody else because of the interconnectedness of our internet and in our lives.
Well, it's interesting how you brought it full circle back to the the original topic there. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, like I said before, like I mentioned in an earlier episode, I grew up in Florida, but I also lived for several years in southern Indiana. And so you bring up both of them, both of those states, and it is interesting. You see the difference in the views that people have on things like immigration there. There's a very different view in Southern Indiana than there is in Tampa, Florida. I think it's interesting. I think that's very interesting. Well, we're coming up on about an hour. We're at about 50 minutes right now. So unless you had anything else you wanted to add on to this point, Chris, let's go ahead and transition over. Did you want to make a quick mention of the British election at all, or no?
Yeah, we could do that. I think that's a really interesting subject because I don't know. I mean, I know how your feelings are. Some of your feelings are about democracy and how I think you and I both hold sort of some libertarian views where less government is better, et cetera. But I think we both can definitely agree that when a vote is held on a particular subject, that it'd be really great if the political leaders follow through on said vote. For example, the Brexit. I think now with what's occurred in the British election, which Theresa May called, it was sort of like, I believe, a symposium or something, and they were expected to sort of expected this election handily, and they didn't, because they kind of just rested on their laurels, if I'm gathering the news stories correctly. Mm-hmm. So, and now there's the party that sort of like took away their victory. They didn't really win, but they took away the victory so much so that it's called a hung parliament, meaning that they're not able to push through their agendas as they would if it was very unified parliament. I guess in American terms, it's if it was like a split Congress, like 50-50 Democrat and Republican, it's really a lot more challenging to push agendas through. Well, it's a similar situation there at this point because of this election. And now there's a little bit of fear that the hard Brexit, so the so-called hard Brexit, which means that Britain would be completely cutting ties with the European Union in, I believe, March 2019, is going to become more of a soft Brexit, meaning that they're still going to be under the influence, at the very least, of Brussels, which is where the European Union's government is held. So it's a little bit frustrating because I'm sure to the voters who voted yes to Brexit, knowing that there's a chance that things might not go as they voted for is a definite frustration. I know it would be for me if that was occurring here. How do you feel about that?
For the Brexit stuff, I think that it's going to, I'll be interested to see how it goes. Honestly, I hadn't even really thought about Brexit. I haven't thought about it since the vote itself. And so I definitely didn't think about what the implications of this election might be for them. I am not a fan of Theresa May. The woman, I find her to be terrifying, to be honest. I know people in this country are really afraid of Donald Trump. I find her terrifying as a leader. After the first terrorist attack that happened in London, I think I may have mentioned this in a previous episode as well, that I remember hearing a clip of, a little bit of her speech, and I was like, that's actually quite a good speech. It was very, Bush-esque after 9/11. But more and more over the last few weeks, especially since there's been more and more of these attacks going on, she's gotten very strict and very she's called for a lot of things that I personally don't agree with, especially things relating to the internet, relating to encryption, basically wanting the British government to take control of the internet in England, and to force companies to censor data, content based on whatever the government arbitrarily decides is, something that could be considered extremist or considered, you could call it hate speech, whatever. It could be anything controversial, anything that they find extreme in their own views. And they want to block things like encryption because of apparently terrorists have been using apps like Telegram, and Signal and things like that, and WhatsApp, to communicate with one another. So is it bad that that those groups are using these products to communicate and coordinate attacks? Yeah, it's awful. But there's a lot of very good, valid uses for something like Telegram or for something like Signal. And so the concern I have is less about, and it sounds bad because I know I have friends over in England, and I feel bad for them that they're having to go through this. I'm like, just come over here, get away as fast as you can. But at the same time, the thing that concerns me is if the Tories, who are the conservatives, as Theresa May's party, if they were to, to force this kind of legislation through in the parliament, and all of a sudden they've already secretly passed sweeping powers, surveillance powers to go to GCHQ, and which is the basically their version of the NSA over there. They're getting more and more hands-on with data collection. They're getting more and more invasive in their reconnaissance on their own people, as well as on the persons of interest, their targets there that they're looking at. And what this does, if this passes, and it's a Western power, it's a major Western power in England, is that it it sets a precedent for places like France, for Germany, for the United States, for those kind of things to happen in other developed Western countries. So that's kind of where I fell on it, and that's more or less what I've been really looking at a lot over the last week.
Yeah, that was frustrating to hear her talk that way about cracking down on internet, and yes, we need, and basically saying yes because these groups, these extremist groups, are using it as a tool. We need to figure out ways to block things off. Yeah, and that is very very worrisome. And hopefully, yeah, again, she was never really in favor of Brexit either. I'm not sure how much you followed the election leading up to her election, but she was never in favor of Brexit. And then she ends up getting elected over a man named Boris Johnson, who actually is, oddly enough, launching another bid for prime minister currently. I think they're sensing that there's blood in the water here with what's happening, and I actually feel like that would be a good thing to bring someone else in if that does happen. He showed, I don't, you know who Nigel Farage is, Dan?
I do not.
Okay, well, he's the party that really promoted the Brexit was called UKIP, and he was basically the main guy from that. If you want to think of him like the Ron Paul of Britain, basically, he's one of those kind of guys who's really for less government, people's freedoms, and being able to. That's why he was pushing Brexit in the first place, and he ended up leaving the party. Sorry,
I like him a lot already.
Yeah, you would like him, and he ended up leaving the party just after the Brexit was won because he wanted to take a hard-earned break. And he's an older gentleman, and he was getting quite a bit of threats to his life and to his family even. So I think that's one of the reasons he left. But some people feel that weakened that UKIP party quite a bit. But this guy Boris Johnson seems like he's sort of on the same train, if you will, going to the same station as Nigel Farage. So we'll keep our eyes on that to see what happens. Maybe Theresa May will be ousted. Who knows what'll happen here? But that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think another thing that can be said about this election is that it's kind of the unspoken thing that I haven't really heard any of the media outlets talk about. Is it kind of shows like a hopefulness for the people in England kind of waking up to realizing, hey, we're about to lose more and more and more of our freedom and liberty over here, which they already don't have a lot of to begin with. But they're waking up, and it's a snap election. They think they're going to all of a sudden get more and more power for the Tories, and that it's going to cause more of a, I think of the Tories a lot like neocons, basically, and they're really trying to crack down and use the crisis that's been going on in London for the last few weeks and use that for political gain. And and I see that the people are pushing back on it because they value their freedom. They value the internet. They value what the internet means for freedom of speech and for being able to share ideas with one another.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just I feel like that the British voters sort of got a little maybe comfortable after the Brexit vote went through, and then they thought, okay, this is just going to go through sort of hands down. It's just going to work, and it didn't. It didn't work out how they thought, and now there's a lot of questioning. So I feel like we just, if especially coming from perspectives that are not necessarily widely held, you really have to keep your guard up and sort of keep your ducks all in a row and be prepared to stand up for your beliefs and what you think is the right way, and vote for your beliefs, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess on that note, there has been a little bit of talk about rioting in Britain because of this. Who knows what will actually come of it, but again, that's something we'll be keeping our eyes on, because Britain is another one of those countries where they have a strong effect on the world, not only just the economy, but the political climate as well. So definitely want to keep our eyes on that moving forward.
I agree with that. Well, we've hit about an hour, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the evening. Chris, I'll let you do the full wrap up, but I just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And also remember, head on over to twowiseguys.org, check out the new site. We're still got some work to do on it. Check out Chris's new project as well. I think we can throw a link in the show notes to your new blog on there as well. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things go the next couple of weeks.
All right, so we're going to close up. Thanks, Dan, for sharing that topic. It was really awesome conversation. I felt like it was a really good way to get our perspectives out and be able to understand how different people from different walks of life and upbringings can view the same circumstances differently. So that was really cool. Just in closing, I just want to share with you guys that we really appreciate your viewership. We really love having you guys come along on the ride with us, and we really do want to encourage you to comment and get involved with the conversation. Just get on the chat. We love to chat with you guys as the show progresses and sort of answer your questions. The last couple of shows we did have a person or two chatting with us, and we were able to answer their questions. So that was really cool, and we really like that. It sort of inspires new directions in the conversation that we didn't anticipate before. So it's really sort of like a catalyst for us to think that way. But with that, I just want to thank you guys for watching. And until next week, we will be, or excuse me, 2 weeks from now, which I believe, let's see, that's the 24th. That'll be June 24th at 6 p.m. Eastern time will be our next live show. And just want to keep you guys updated with that. And if you think about it, just give us a donation or keep us in your prayers, whatever you think is a good way to support our channel if you like what we're doing. So thank you, and good night.
Good night, everyone.